A Navy SEAL walked into a lawyer's office to sign divorce papers. 20 minutes later, he'd be kicking down a basement door to save a woman who'd been left to die in the dark. Her captor made one fatal mistake. He never imagined the military working dog sitting in the waiting room above, and he never imagined the warrior who would refuse to ignore what others couldn't hear. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mom said no one cares about stories of discipline, courage, and service. If you do care, please subscribe and stand with this channel to prove that wrong. I enjoy stories more when I imagine them myself, so that's how I tell mine. This story isn't just meant to be watched. It's meant to be imagined. The morning sun blazed over the strip mall parking lot in Oceanside, California, turning the asphalt into a shimmering lake of heat. Senior Chief Petty Officer Marcus Kane sat in his weathered Jeep, engine ticking as it cooled, and stared at the nondescript law office wedged between a nail salon and a tax preparation service. He didn't want to be here. Marcus was a Navy SEAL, a man who'd spent 15 years moving through the world's darkest corners with surgical precision. He was built like a sledgehammer, 6'2", shoulders that strained against his civilian clothes, and hands that bore the scars of rope burns, shrapnel, and hard living. His face was all sharp angles and sun-weathered skin, with eyes the color of storm clouds that rarely showed emotion. He'd been trained to move through hostile territory without leaving a trace, to make split-second decisions that meant life or death, to carry wounded brothers on his back through hellfire. But sitting in a parking lot, about to sign papers that would officially end his marriage, he felt more exposed than he ever had in a combat zone. Beside him in the passenger seat, his partner watched the office entrance with unwavering focus. Havoc was an 8-year-old Belgian Malinois, 70 pounds of coiled muscle and relentless drive. His official designation was MWD, Military Working Dog, but that sterile label didn't capture what he truly was. Havoc was an extension of Marcus himself, a detection and patrol specialist trained to find explosives, track targets, and apprehend threats with devastating efficiency. His coat was a rich mahogany and black, his eyes amber and impossibly intelligent. On deployment, Havoc was a weapon. At home, he was the only constant in Marcus's fractured world. Marcus checked his watch. 11:47 a.m. The appointment was at noon. He'd been back stateside for 3 weeks, wedged into a mandatory decompression period between a brutal 9-month rotation in the Middle East and the inevitable spin-up for the next deployment. This leave was supposed to be about rest, about letting the adrenaline drain from his system. Instead, he was here, at a family law office, dealing with paperwork that felt more terrifying than any firefight. The divorce had been inevitable. Sarah had said as much in her last email, the one that arrived while he was still overseas. "I can't do this anymore, Marcus. I can't be married to a ghost. You're never here, and when you are, you're somewhere else. I need someone who can be present. I need a life that doesn't revolve around waiting for a knock on the door telling me you're not coming home." He hadn't fought it. How could he? She was right. He was a ghost. The teams were his family, his purpose, his identity. Everything else was just noise in the background. But the paperwork still needed to be signed, the assets still needed to be divided, and his lawyer, a former JAG officer named Patricia Cordero, had insisted on an in-person meeting. "Just get it done," Marcus muttered to himself. He looked at Havoc. "Come on, boy. Let's make this quick." Havoc let out a soft chuff and hopped down from the Jeep, his movements economical and silent. Marcus clipped a short lead to his collar, more for show than control. Havoc didn't need a leash. He never strayed more than 3 feet from Marcus unless commanded otherwise. They had worked together for 6 years, across 4 deployments, through sandstorms and firefights and midnight raids. They communicated in a language beyond words, a partnership forged in the crucible of combat. They walked across the parking lot, the heat radiating off the asphalt in visible waves. The law office was small, tucked into the corner of the strip mall. A faded sign above the door read Cordero and Associates, Family Law. Marcus pushed open the glass door, and a small bell chimed overhead. The reception area was empty save for a young woman behind a desk who looked up from her computer screen. She was in her early 20s, blonde hair pulled into a tight ponytail, her expression friendly but professional. She wore a pale blue blouse and had a name tag that read Cassie. "Mr. Kane," she said with a polite smile. "Miss Cordero is expecting you. You can go right back. Second door on the left." Thank you, Marcus said. He glanced down at Havoc. The dog can stay out here if it's a problem. Oh no, Cassie said quickly, her eyes lighting up as she looked at the Malinois. Miss Cordero told me you'd have him. It's fine. We're dog-friendly. She leaned forward slightly. He's beautiful. What's his name? Havoc, Marcus said. That's perfect, she said with a laugh. He looks like trouble. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. He is. In the best way. Cassie gestured toward the hallway. Go ahead. Second door on the left. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? I'm good, Marcus said. Thank you. He walked past the desk toward a narrow hallway that smelled like old coffee and printer toner. The walls were lined with framed certificates and diplomas, the typical bureaucratic decoration of a law office. He found the second door on the left, knocked twice, and pushed it open. Patricia Cordero was a woman in her late 50s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense. She wore a gray suit that looked like it had been pressed that morning, and her silver hair was cut short and practical. She looked up from a stack of papers on her desk and gestured to the chair across from her. Her office was small but organized, every surface meticulously arranged. A single window looked out onto the parking lot, the blinds half drawn against the harsh California sun. Marcus, she said, standing to shake his hand. Her grip was firm, professional. Good to see you. Have a seat. Marcus sat down, Havoc settling at his feet with the quiet patience of a soldier. The dog's eyes swept the room once, cataloging exits, assessing threats, then settled into a watchful stillness. Patricia slid a folder across the desk, her movements precise. This is straightforward, she said, opening the folder to reveal a stack of documents. Sarah's lawyer sent over the final agreement. No contested assets, no alimony, clean split. You just need to sign and we're done. Marcus opened the folder and scanned the documents. It was all there, just as Patricia had said. The house would go to Sarah. He'd keep his truck, his gear, and his pension. Everything else would be divided down the middle. It was clinical, efficient, and utterly devoid of emotion. Just like him. He felt a hollow ache in his chest as he read through the terms, the dissolution of 7 years reduced to bullet points and legal language. She's already signed, Patricia said, watching him. This is just your signature, and we file. Marcus nodded. He pulled a pen from his pocket and began signing each page where Patricia had marked with a small yellow tab. His hand moved mechanically, each stroke of the pen feeling like the closing of a door he'd never be able to open again. The whole process took less than 5 minutes. That's it, Patricia said, collecting the papers and tapping them into a neat stack. I'll file these today. You'll get the final decree in about 6 weeks. She paused, her expression softening just slightly. For what it's worth, Marcus, I'm sorry. I know this isn't easy. It's fine, Marcus said, though his voice sounded flat even to his own ears. It's the right thing. Patricia nodded but didn't press. She'd been a JAG officer for 20 years before retiring to private practice. She understood the cost of service, the sacrifices that came with wearing the uniform. She understood what it meant to be married to the mission. Marcus stood up, ready to leave, ready to put this chapter behind him and move on to whatever came next. He'd go back to his small apartment, pack his gear, wait for the call that would send him back downrange. It was the only life he knew, the only life that made sense. And then Havoc froze. Marcus felt it before he saw it. The dog's entire body went rigid, his ears snapping forward, his nose twitching. Havoc was trained to detect explosives, chemical agents, and human scent trails. He didn't react like this unless something was wrong. Very wrong. What is it, boy? Marcus asked, his voice dropping into the low, controlled tone he used in the field. Havoc didn't respond. He was staring at the floor, at the corner of Patricia's office where a small heating vent was set into the wall. The dog took 2 deliberate steps forward, his nose pressed against the vent grate, and let out a low, guttural growl. It was not his stranger alert. It was not his explosive detection signal. It was something else entirely. Something Marcus had only heard in combat zones when Havoc detected human distress. Is he okay? Patricia asked, concern creeping into her voice as she stood up from her desk. Marcus knelt beside Havoc, placing a hand on the dog's shoulder. Havoc was vibrating with tension, his focus absolute. This wasn't a false alert. This wasn't anxiety or boredom. This was real. Havoc, Marcus commanded, his voice firm. Heel. Havoc broke the command. That was the moment Marcus Kane's leave ended. A dog trained to Havoc's level did not break a direct command unless the stimulus was overwhelming, unless every fiber of his training was screaming that something demanded immediate attention. Havoc moved past the vent and began scratching at the corner of the office, his claws scraping against the baseboards. He let out a sharp, impatient whine, then looked back at Marcus, his amber eyes wide with urgency. "Marcus, what's going on?" Patricia asked, her voice rising slightly as she moved around her desk. "I don't know," Marcus said, standing up. "But something's wrong." He moved to the corner where Havoc was focused and knelt down. The office was on the ground floor of the strip mall, which meant there was a basement below. Marcus pressed his ear to the floor and listened. At first, he heard nothing. Just the hum of the air conditioning, the faint sound of traffic outside, the buzz of fluorescent lights in the hallway. And then he heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible thump. Then another, and another. A rhythmic, desperate sound. Someone was below them, and they were trying to signal for help. The thumping was weak, barely audible, but it was there. Deliberate. Intentional. Marcus stood up, his mind already shifting into operator mode. The switch was instantaneous, a light flipping in his brain. The man signing divorce papers vanished, replaced by the senior chief. "Patricia," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "Do you have access to the basement?" Patricia blinked, confused. "The basement? No. This building is old. The basement's been sealed off for years. The landlord said it was structurally unsound." "Why? Who owns this building?" Marcus asked, his eyes scanning the room, already calculating angles and access points. "A man named Derek Hollis," Patricia said. "He owns most of the properties in this strip mall. He's the one who leases this space to me." "Marcus, what's going on?" Marcus didn't answer. He pulled out his phone and dialed 911. His movements were efficient, practiced, the muscle memory of 1,000 emergency calls in 1,000 hostile situations. 911. "What's your emergency?" The dispatcher answered, her voice bored and routine. "I need police and paramedics at the Cordero Law Office, 1247, Oceanside Boulevard," Marcus said, his voice flat, clear, and loud. "I have reason to believe someone is being held in the basement of this building. I'm a Navy SEAL, and my working dog has alerted to human distress." There was a pause on the other end, the sound of typing. "Sir, can you repeat that?" the dispatcher said, her tone shifting from bored to alert. "There is someone in the basement of this building," Marcus said slowly, enunciating each word. "They are alive, and they are signaling for help. I need units here now. This is not a drill. This is an active situation." "Sir, I'm dispatching units now," the dispatcher said. "Can you stay on the line?" "No," Marcus said. "I'm going to find access to the basement. Get them here fast." He hung up before the dispatcher could respond. Patricia was staring at him, her face pale, her hand pressed to her mouth. "Marcus," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Are you sure? I've been in this office for 3 years. If someone was down there, we would have heard something. We would have known." "Havoc doesn't make mistakes," Marcus said. He looked at the dog, who was still focused on the floor, still whining softly. "Stay here, Patricia. Lock the door behind me." "Where are you going?" she asked. "To find whoever's down there," Marcus said. He moved toward the door, Havoc at his heels. They stepped into the hallway. Cassie, the receptionist, looked up from her desk, her expression curious. "Is everything okay?" she asked. Marcus ignored her. He was scanning the hallway, looking for access to the basement. There had to be a door, a stairwell, something. His eyes swept over the walls, the ceiling, the floor. And then he saw it. At the end of the hall, tucked behind a stack of filing boxes and an old artificial plant, was a narrow door. It was painted the same beige color as the walls, designed to blend in, to be overlooked. A heavy-duty padlock secured it, the metal worn but functional. Marcus moved toward it, his steps measured and silent. Havoc stayed close, his body tense, his nose working the air. Marcus knelt in front of the lock and examined it. It was old, a basic pin tumbler mechanism, nothing sophisticated. But it was sturdy enough to keep most people out. Most people weren't Navy SEALs. Marcus pulled a small leather case from his pocket and unzipped it. Inside was a set of lock picks, precision tools he'd been trained to use in urban environments, in situations where breaching a door quietly was the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. He selected a tension wrench and a rake pick, tools designed for speed over finesse. He inserted the tension wrench into the bottom of the keyway, applying just enough rotational pressure to bind the pins. Then he slid the rake pick into the top of the keyway and began working it back and forth, feeling for the feedback of pins setting. It was a skill that required focus, patience, and a delicate touch. The first pin clicked into place, then the second, then the third. 30 seconds later, the padlock popped open with a soft metallic snick. Marcus removed the lock and set it aside. He gripped the handle of the door and pulled. The hinges protested with a low creak, the sound of metal that hadn't moved in years. The door swung open, revealing a narrow wooden staircase descending into darkness. The air that rolled out was stale and cold, carrying with it the faint smell of mildew and something else. Something sharp and chemical. Bleach. Marcus's blood ran cold. Bleach was used to destroy evidence, to scrub away DNA, to erase traces of violence. It was the smell of a crime scene, the smell of someone trying to cover their tracks. Havoc, Marcus said, his voice low. Search. Havoc didn't need to be told twice. He moved down the stairs, his nose working, his body low and fast. Marcus followed, pulling a small tactical flashlight from his pocket. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a low-ceiling basement cluttered with old furniture, boxes, and debris. The concrete floor was cracked and uneven, the walls lined with exposed pipes and electrical conduits. And then the beam landed on her. She was in the far corner of the basement, slumped against the concrete wall. A woman, mid-30s, dressed in the tattered remains of a business suit. Her hands were bound behind her back with zip ties, her ankles similarly restrained. Her face was bruised, her lips split, her left eye swollen shut. Her hair was matted with dried blood. She wasn't moving. Havoc reached her first, pushing his nose against her hand, whining deep in his throat. Marcus was already in motion, his medic training taking over. He knelt beside her and checked her airway. Clear. He tilted her head back slightly and felt for a pulse at her carotid. It was there, faint and thready, but it was there. She was alive. Ma'am, Marcus said loudly, his voice calm but commanding. Can you hear me? You're safe now. Help is coming. The woman's eyes fluttered open. They were unfocused, glassy with pain and dehydration. She tried to speak, but only a dry rasp came out. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Don't talk, Marcus said. He pulled out a compact trauma kit from his cargo pocket and retrieved his shears, cutting through the zip ties on her wrists and ankles. The plastic had been pulled so tight it had cut into her skin, leaving deep purple grooves. Her limbs stayed in place, frozen in their bound position, her circulation severely compromised. Marcus wrapped an emergency mylar blanket around her shoulders and began checking her for injuries. Bruises covered her arms and torso. Cuts, some deep, marred her face and hands. There were signs of prolonged captivity, dehydration, possible hypothermia. This wasn't a random assault. This was systematic. This was torture. Havoc pressed his body against her side, sharing his warmth, whining softly to keep her conscious. The woman's hand moved weakly, resting on the dog's head. Her fingers trembled as they tangled in his fur. Good boy, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Marcus heard footsteps on the stairs. He turned to see two Oceanside police officers descending, their hands on their sidearms, their flashlights sweeping the basement. OCPD, one of them called out, his voice sharp and authoritative. Identify yourself. Senior Chief Marcus Kane, U.S. Navy, Marcus said, not moving from the woman's side. I'm the one who called it in. She's alive, but she needs immediate medical attention. Now. The officers approached cautiously, their eyes scanning the scene. One of them, a younger cop with a buzz cut and a name tag that read Officer Ramirez, keyed his radio. Dispatch, we have a confirmed victim in the basement. Female, mid-30s, conscious but in critical condition. Signs of prolonged captivity and severe trauma. Get EMS down here immediately. The second officer, older with graying hair and a weathered face, knelt beside Marcus. His name tag read Sergeant Martinez. What's her condition? Dehydrated, Marcus said, his voice clipped and professional. Possible hypothermia. Multiple contusions and lacerations. Looks like she's been here for days, maybe longer. Zip ties were pulled tight enough to cause nerve damage. She needs fluids, warming, and a full trauma workup. Sergeant Martinez looked at the woman, then at Marcus, then at Havoc. How did you find her? The dog. Marcus said simply. He alerted upstairs. I heard her signaling through the floor. Martinez's eyes narrowed. You're the SEAL who called it in? Yes. The woman's eyes focused on Marcus. She grabbed his arm with surprising strength, pulling him closer. Her grip was desperate, her nails digging into his skin. Derek, she whispered, her voice raw and broken. Derek Hollis. He did this. Sergeant Martinez's face went pale. Derek Hollis? The landlord? The woman nodded weakly, tears streaming down her bruised face. I'm his wife. Elena. He locked me down here. I tried to leave. I tried. But he said I'd never get out. He said no one would believe me. Marcus's jaw tightened. Where is he now? I don't know, Elena whispered. He comes every few days. Brings water. Tells me I'll learn. Tells me I'll understand. Officer Ramirez was already on his radio, his voice urgent. We need units at Derek Hollis's residence immediately. Suspect in a domestic kidnapping and assault. Consider him armed and dangerous. I repeat, armed and dangerous. The paramedics arrived minutes later, flooding the basement with light and activity. They descended the stairs with a stretcher and medical equipment, moving with practiced efficiency. Marcus stepped back, letting them work. Havoc stayed close to Elena until they loaded her onto the stretcher, only moving when Marcus gave the command. You saved her life, Sergeant Martinez said, approaching Marcus as they carried Elena up the stairs. If you hadn't been here, if your dog hadn't alerted, he trailed off, shaking his head. She wouldn't have made it another day. Marcus didn't respond. He just watched as they took Elena out of the darkness and into the light, the paramedics already working to stabilize her, to bring her back from the edge. We're going to need a full statement from you, Martinez said. And we'll need to secure this scene. This is now an active crime scene. Understood, Marcus said. As they climbed the stairs back to the main floor, Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. Are you okay? Police are everywhere. What happened? Marcus typed back quickly. Found her. Alive. We'll explain soon. Derek Hollis was arrested 4 hours later at his home in a quiet Oceanside suburb. He was a man in his late 40s, balding, with the soft build of someone who spent most of his time behind a desk. He wore khakis and a polo shirt, the picture of suburban normalcy. When the police searched his property, they found a second woman locked in a storage shed behind his house. Her name was Rachel Mendez. She had been missing for 6 months. The investigation unraveled quickly, each thread revealing a darker truth. Derek Hollis was a predator who used his position as a landlord to identify vulnerable women. Women who were isolated, women who were struggling financially, women who wouldn't be missed right away. He would befriend them, charm them, offer them deals on rent or help with repairs. And then he would trap them. Elena had been his wife for 3 years before she tried to leave. That's when he locked her in the basement, telling her family and friends that she'd moved out of state for a new job. No one questioned it. No one looked for her. Rachel had been one of his tenants. When she fell behind on rent, he offered her a deal. Work it off, he'd said. She'd never had a chance to refuse. He'd drugged her coffee during what she thought was a friendly conversation about payment plans, and she'd woken up in the shed, bound and terrified. Both women were hospitalized, treated for severe dehydration, malnutrition, and trauma. Both women survived. Elena spent 2 weeks in the ICU, fighting off infections and pneumonia. Rachel required surgery to repair damage from her prolonged captivity. But they were alive. And both women would testify. Derek Hollis was charged with 2 counts of kidnapping, 2 counts of false imprisonment, multiple counts of assault and battery, and attempted murder. The evidence was overwhelming. The prosecution presented medical records, forensic evidence from the basement and shed, testimony from neighbors who'd heard suspicious sounds, and the harrowing accounts of Elena and Rachel themselves. His trial lasted 3 weeks. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge, a stern woman named Margaret Chun, had looked at him with undisguised contempt as she delivered the sentence. You preyed on vulnerable women, she'd said. You used your position of power to exploit, torture, and imprison them. You are a danger to society, and you will spend the rest of your life behind bars. 6 weeks later, Marcus Kane sat in a small park near the Oceanside Pier, watching the sun set over the Pacific. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, the waves rolling in with a rhythmic crash against the shore. Havoc lay at his feet, his head resting on Marcus's boot, content and relaxed. The divorce papers had been finalized. His leave was almost over. In 2 weeks, he'd be back with the teams, back to the only life he knew. But something had changed. Something fundamental had shifted inside him. His phone buzzed. A text message from Elena Hollis, who was now going by her maiden name, Elena Torres. Marcus, I wanted to thank you again for what you did. I'm out of the hospital now and starting therapy. It's hard, but I'm fighting. Rachel and I have become friends. We're both survivors because of you and Havoc. I attached a photo I thought you'd like. Marcus opened the attachment. It was Elena, standing in front of a small house, smiling. She was holding a sign that read, "Thank you for hearing me when no one else would." Beside her stood Rachel, her arm around Elena's shoulders, both of them looking stronger than they had any right to after what they'd endured. Marcus stared at the photo for a long time. Then he looked down at Havoc. "You did good, boy," he said quietly. "You did real good." Havoc's tail thumped once against the ground, a simple acknowledgement. And for the first time in a long time, Marcus Kane felt like he'd done something that mattered. Not as a SEAL, not as a warrior in a foreign land fighting an abstract war, but as a man who had simply chosen to listen when it would have been easier to walk away. A man who had refused to ignore the signs, who had trusted his partner, who had acted when others might have hesitated. He thought about Sarah, about the divorce, about the life he'd lost. And he realized something. He'd spent 15 years hunting monsters in the dark corners of the world. But there were monsters here too. Right here in quiet suburban neighborhoods, behind closed doors, in basements and sheds where no one thought to look. Maybe, he thought, the fight wasn't over. Maybe it had just moved closer to home. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from Sergeant Martinez. "Kane," Martinez said when Marcus answered. "I wanted to give you an update. We've been going through Hollis's properties. We found evidence that suggests there may have been other victims over the years. Women who disappeared, cases that went cold. We're reopening investigations. This thing is bigger than we thought." Marcus was silent for a moment. "How can I help?" "You've already done more than enough," Martinez said. "But if you're serious, we could use someone like you. Someone who doesn't give up. Someone who sees what others miss." "I'm listening," Marcus said. "There's a task force forming," Martinez said. "Multi-agency. FBI, local PD, victim advocates. We're going after predators like Hollis. People who exploit positions of trust. Landlords, employers, caregivers. We need investigators, people with your skill set. People who know how to find what's hidden." Marcus looked out at the ocean, at the endless expanse of water reflecting the dying light. He thought about Elena and Rachel. He thought about all the others who might still be out there, trapped and invisible. "Tell me more," Marcus said. And just like that, Senior Chief Marcus Kane found a new mission. Not in a desert halfway around the world, but right here at home. Fighting a different kind of war. Saving a different kind of life. If this story of courage, loyalty, and refusing to ignore injustice touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that subscribe button to stand with this channel and prove that stories of discipline and service still matter. We want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed an injustice and chosen to act? Have you ever trusted your instincts when everyone else said you were wrong? Let us know in the comments below. May God bless you and your family. May He give you the courage to speak up when others stay silent. And may He send you a Havoc when you need one most. If you believe in this message, if you felt the power of this story, please type Amen in the comments. Let us fill this space with hope for one another. Thank you for listening.